GM everyone, and by that I mean G merge. I can't believe I made that joke, but I've been seeing it everywhere. Welcome to the DeFi state. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nicole Benham, the host of this show and head of community for Hashflow. On this show, we bring in notable speakers, founders, investors, and generally the brightest minds in the industry to discuss what the future of decentralization will look like. What I love about this show, and I always mention it, is that every guest is so multidimensional and has so much to contribute beyond insights on DeFi and Web3. If you're eager to learn and expand your mind, you're in the right place. Today, we have with us my co host, Varun, also known as Gandalf the Brown, our CEO. We have two special guests for this episode of the DeFi State. The first is Udi Wertheimer, just known as Udi. If you don't know him, that's your fault. He's an independent developer and consultant and former Bitcoin maxi. The second is Zaki Manian, who also wears many hats in the block space. While we will be discussing the ETH merge today, which, it's an Ethereum event, this does affect all of crypto. So it's very fitting to have two guests from the extended crypto community here. Varun, I know you're excited about this.
No, absolutely. First of all, Yudi and Zaki, thank you so much for making the time to participating in the space today. I think this in particular I was really excited about is because I think the way I see it, like this, the merge is one of the biggest technological events that has taken place, not just in crypto but generally in technology, right? And it's not just Ethereans who are who should be excited about, but it's something that can be celebrated by everybody in crypto as a whole, right? So I think and the reason why I was excited about having Yudi and Saki is because even when we announced the space, a bunch of people were like, oh wait, no, but they're not Ethereum people, they're not DeFi. And I'm like, but the whole point is that this is the moment for us to come together and have a more open discussion with not just people inside, but with everybody in the space to see how we focus on the broader picture and not just be tribalizing things. So I think having this discussion with people not just in Ethereum but also with folks from other communities and how they view the space and how they think this is going to shape the future of crypto is going to be super important, right? So I think that's one of the reasons why I thought this was one of my favorite guest lists for this space, and the timing was obviously impeccable. So I'm quite excited about having both of you guys. And I think, Nicole, you already had some questions. I think I also wanted to make this a bit more educational about what this change is going to bring to Ethereum, to broader crypto community. And Zaki, I think you have interesting insights around the Cosmos ecosystem as well. And then Udi, you can obviously share your thoughts on the Bitcoin world, but also how this generally affects everything else. Because I've obviously been following you guys' threads, and we've had conversations in the past, but it would be nice to have that discussion be brought to everybody else. So I'll stop there. Nicole, I'll let you take that.
Well, first of all, what's up, guys?
It's good to be here. Happy merge.
Happy
GM.
merge. Happy merge. Let's get right into it. Let's start with your takes on Ethereum in general. Udi, I feel like I read before that you used to be a critic. What's your take on ETH today? And then Zaki, I want to go to you right after.
I think in a day like today, especially if you have like the context of being around for a little while, I'm thinking back to the Ethereum pre-sale in I don't know, it was 2015 or 14, and people were talking about doing this migration from proof of work to proof of stake since day one, since before day one. And it was always expected to be a long process. Maybe it ended up being a little longer than expected, but it was always expected to be a long process. And I think the fact that it got there and nailed it successfully, it's really impressive. Like honestly, you don't often see projects that promise something that long time ago and then go and execute it. And it's not just a project making a product; it's a community that took it from a vision into reality. So I think that's really cool.
Zaki.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like second this. I've been talking to Vitalik about proof of stake since easily 2015, and we have gone back and forth about consensus algorithms and incentives and staking designs and all of this stuff and MEV for years. But just the sheer will from the Ethereum community to sort of to accomplish what was accomplished today is just, it is a monument. And I think like I said, if you are sort of part of this blockchain revolution and this has not touched your heart, I don't really know what else you're doing. I mean, and I'm in Berlin, and it feels very special to be in Berlin for this. I went down to full node this morning. I couldn't go to sleep till like 3 a.m. because I was so excited. I was like just playing video games until 3 a.m. because I just couldn't go to sleep. And then I went down to full node at like 7:30, and they had a live band playing like a randomly selected Mozart song for every block until the merge happened, which was really fun. And it felt a little bit like, it felt a little religious. It felt like it was, but it's like
a little cultish, Zaki.
I mean, if it's a cult, I was sucked in. So a cult is just a religion. It's just a cult that scales. So
that's so good. That sounds super exciting. I mean, there's nothing like that in LA where I am, but wow. I mean, what an exciting place to be during the merge. Let's get into what the merge is accomplishing. And you hear the merge will make Ethereum fast and cheap. How and in what capacity?
I mean, I would not expect the merge to massively change the cost of using Ethereum in any significant way. It's not really a solve for that problem. It does mitigate some attacks that had actually been going on the consensus level of Ethereum and proof of work, where, for instance, F2 Pool was manipulating the consensus, the proof of work consensus algorithm to front run people and get additional MEV. In fact, this general MEV is kind of, I think, a huge theme of what's changing in Ethereum, what's going on, why the merge happened, and stuff like that. So the front running and the extraction of value from block producers is huge motivation and area of risk and big area of change in the merge. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest, so one of my projects is something called Sommelier. We have a Cosmos chain that's bridged to Ethereum that is managing user funds and on top of Ethereum DeFi. And I think one of the things that's just extraordinary is and I was sitting with the optimism people while the merge happened, and just everybody was most of us were everybody whipped out their laptops and checked on their stuff for a few minutes after the merge, and everybody was yeah, everything's operating as normal. Nothing really needed to, everything kind of went so smoothly. And I think that is just such an extraordinary accomplishment to tear out something as fundamental as a consensus algorithm and replace it and replace how your nodes have to operate and all of that stuff, and just have all of it seamlessly occur over 5 minutes, basically. It's just, I don't know, it's mind blowing.
So, okay, I had a couple maybe it might be useful maybe to double click, because there's a bunch of newcomers here in the space. So what's fundamentally TLDR diff between the various consensus algorithms, namely POW and POS, and what sort of trade-offs did Ethereum make? And I think that'd be interesting to know, and what that means in comparison to POW and POS. And I was also curious to hear more about how the Ethereum POS differs from the Tenant or Cosmos POS as well. But I think we can start with the diff between, this POW and POS. Maybe Udi, you want to chime in there, or Zaki, whichever way you want to go.
Sure. I think, so, at the most basic level, in proof of work, um, you run mining machines, and the blocks are generated by miners who own these machines and spend energy in order to participate in this lottery. And in proof of stake, you own coins and you stake these coins, and that means you put them at risk of, if something goes wrong at your end, you might lose those coins. But the benefit is that you can participate in the issuance of new coins. That's the very high level look at it. And the obvious benefit probably for proof of stake is that you don't need all of this massive infrastructure of mining machines that otherwise don't do anything important other than allowing proof of work to exist. And I think that on the other side is, you could argue that proof of work is probably potentially more neutral. I don't know if we have enough time running like proof of stake systems in large scale to see what happens over the long term and how they tend to react, not technically but economically. We definitely have some, right? Like, it's not like Ethereum is the first proof of stake system, but it's obviously the biggest at this point. So, like, things that could happen is, like, what happens if a lot of the stake concentrates in a couple or few exchanges, which is kind of likely because this is where most of the ETH is deposited right now. So then what happens? What happens if governments try to sanction these exchanges and require them to not approve certain transactions or certain blocks? And you can get into this argument and discussion, and it's very possible that the proof of stake is resilient enough. I think the best answer is we don't know. And in that view, I think it's really great that Ethereum is doing this, because in a year or two we probably will know. Is it resilient enough? Is it not? So I think it's great that we're going to have this answer.
Guys, there's been a lot of arguments against. Oh, Zaki, go ahead, and then I'll get into my next question.
Well, I was trying to like build on top of that. Like, what we mostly like, kind of the way I think, like, the way a lot of protocol designers think about this in the space is, proof of stake gives us a lot more knobs to turn and degrees of freedom when we're designing blockchain protocols for mitigating short range attacks. So mitigating attacks where somebody's like, oh, I saw like, so like in proof of work, saying someone saw, oh, I saw that like you found this like really juicy ARB in this block, and I saw that you built a block because you have this sort of permissionless block building mechanism, and like, I don't think you get that ARB. I'm going to build a block that forks that block and try it. And like, when you are operating in the proof of work world, you basically have no tools as a protocol designer to be like, hey, I want to punish people for that kind of behavior. I want to punish them for trying to undermine the settlement guarantees of the protocol in order to like maximize their own personal profit. But like, there are these long-term questions about censorship resistance and resilience against sort of long-term, long-range attacks and stuff like that have always been, standing over the proof of stake space, or the proof of the sort of proof of work versus proof of stake design space. And I think we're going to see is probably the biggest answer. But there's like a lot of different changes, and there's a lot of different proofs of variants of proof of stake out there. There's this enormous sort of design space that the exploration is being started with, like, large. It's like, it was kind of like proof of stake had existed for a long time. I would say that like the Cosmos network launching and like the all of the implementations of Tendermint kind of raised the stakes. Having Binance and BNB. So you started to see like multi-billion-dollar assets living on top of proof of stake sort of in 2019. And now here we are at 2022, and we have moved, the sort of largest economy, not necessarily the biggest asset, but the largest economy to proof of stake. And it is definitely going to be a trial by fire for the next couple of years to see whether or not we have built the system that I think we all thought we built.
So, Zaki, a follow-up question there. So obviously, I think Cosmos has been running POS as well for a while. So, have you seen any odd behavior or any such attacks in the past with Cosmos, or more broadly speaking, like how does Ethereum's POS differ from the Cosmos implementation, and what trade-offs are made, and so did you have any insights there?
Yeah. So okay, so there's I would say there's like a few big trade-offs. So Cosmos uses what is called a traditional BFT protocol. So single block finality, but the network will halt if a third of the the voting power goes offline. And but we don't have like reorgs like should not occur under ordinary circumstances. And then we have built this huge economy around on-chain light clients called IBC, where you have all the chains are connected via IBC and use on-chain light clients. So we do. There's like a lot of value secured by our consensus algorithms. We have seen the most extraordinary test of this entire system came during the Terra collapse. Having a $40 billion blockchain built on top of the Cosmos technology stack connected to IBC melt into nothing basically in a couple of hours, where the cost of attack fell from hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars to millions of dollars, and where it was like on trajectory to go thousands of dollars before or tens of thousands of dollars before the validators intervened. There was this extraordinary test of the ecosystem. We saw all kinds of weird stuff. One of the things that I was pointing out on Twitter yesterday is one of the teams I work with did an analysis and said 40% of the MEV that has ever been extracted on Cosmos was extracted in those 2 days of the Terra collapse, which is a sort of interesting thing. But like the big trade-offs, so Ethereum uses what's called an ebb and flow protocol, where they have a Nakamoto-style proof-of-stake protocol that's coupled to a traditional BFT protocol, and it's a pretty complex protocol. I work very closely with Professor David Shea, who has found a number of attacks on the protocol, most of which has been fixed. But there is no formal proof of security for the current Ethereum protocol, but there is one for Tendermint and Cosmos, and we rely on that to make IBC possible. So that's like one difference. Ethereum also really optimized for having a very large number of public keys. So every 32 ETH has to be its own unique public key in the system, and they have something on the order of 500,000 public keys in the consensus algorithm. But it means that it takes about 10 minutes to finalize, whereas Cosmos chains can finalize a block between half a second and 5 to 6 seconds is very common in our networks. So those are some of the trade-offs.
Wow. All right, Zaki, really quickly, for everyone's understanding, can you go over IBC?
Yeah. So one of the cool things, I'll like do a quick story about. I'll tell the story. Is okay. So Satoshi puts in the original Bitcoin white paper this idea of light clients, right? Like that you don't have to run a full node, that you can just look at the block headers, and then from those block headers and proofs of inclusion in those blocks, figure out track your accounts and stuff like that. So this is like an idea that goes back to the original Bitcoin white paper. But basically no one uses light clients for anything, for all of this. But one of the things that has been a motivation of proof of stake is it makes light clients a lot easier to write. It makes them a lot better. It makes them a lot more powerful. And one of the cool things that you can build with light clients is you can actually put them on blockchains. So you can actually have a blockchain that contains a light client for another blockchain. And so Cosmos has really taken this idea to, dialed it up to 11. and basically every Cosmos chain can contain a light client for every other Cosmos chain. And we use that to build like a message passing protocol and an interoperability protocol where you can send tokens and control accounts on other chains and have shared security. And you can build all kinds of different protocols on top of this like primitive of we have on-chain light clients. And so that was like basically like an 8-year journey from the idea of doing this in 2014 or 7-year journey of the idea of doing this to shipping it in the beginning of 2021. And now this protocol routinely moves billions of dollars and is considered like sort of one of the more robust and secure bridging protocols that are.
A follow-up question there, Zaki, or for you, both of you guys. Do you see a world where IBC can interact with something like EVM or even like Bitcoin protocols, or I'm gonna pretend like a novice and ask you a question so everybody else can hear that, so then you guys can answer it.
I'll jump on as the IBC guy. Udi, do you want to speak to that, or I can jump on as the IBC guy?
I actually wanted to ask for Varun to repeat the question. I kind of missed it.
No, I was just curious to see, like, is there a world where IBC can interact with like Bitcoin or EVM compatible chains to allow for interoperability between IBC chains and non-IBC? Is that something that is possible? Is it in development, or what's the current state of such developments?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, probably Zaki can talk about specific projects. It's definitely something that some people are exploring.
Yeah, so there is this very cool, one of the trade-offs that Ethereum has picked in this proof of stake design space, right, is that they have made light clients more difficult than Tendermint does. And so this has posed a bit of a challenge to people who want to build IBC for Ethereum to Cosmos and between Ethereum chains. There's been this very cool project that has been presenting that Gnosis has been running, which is basically like an IBC-like system between Gnosis chain and Ethereum 2, where they are using zero-knowledge proofs to facilitate light client interactions between the Gnosis chain and the Ethereum mainnet, which seems like the most IBC-like thing. And I have been talking to several teams about trying to build IBC for the EVM ecosystem. It seems like I would say that the general, like one of the things that is just generally happened is like, in the as is normal in the blockchains, in like I guess in computing in general, is it's like on one hand it like intellectually you're like high probability the merge is successful, high probability like all of this works, but you're like the commitment both from yourself and from the community and capital allocators to build on top of these systems and to like assume changes a lot when the system goes live. And so you can already kind of see the merge having impact on foundations and venture capital funds and other people who are willing to potentially fund mechanisms of really densely interoperating IBC with Ethereum 2 or with the like post-merge Ethereum world. So I'd say the probability of having IBC natively integrated into Ethereum has increased by at least an order of magnitude in the last day.
Go ahead, Varun.
I'll actually go. I think that answered most of my questions, and also just generally, I think that was a pretty thorough response to it. I think for many people's understanding of what's going on, because even for me at the beginning, it took a while for me to get a grasp on how IBC works and what are these message passing protocols and how the interoperability would work, and so on. I think I also want to double click a bit more on the MEV part. But Nicole, if you had any questions before that, I'll let you go ahead first.
Well, yeah, my question was, there are a lot of arguments against the merge from non-Ethereum communities. There's a lot of backlash because ETH becoming POS, will make it more centralized. What's your take there?
I think Udi will have a better response there. So
Udi,
Yeah,
let's
I
hear.
mean, I think the biggest thing you can say is that Ethereum is changing from a known capacity to a somewhat unknown capacity, and you know, like Zaki said, there's definitely been proof of stake systems before, but one, they're materially different than the implementation that Ethereum uses, and two, Ethereum is the biggest economy in crypto. I think we can all agree on that. So we just don't know how it's going to play out. But so some people are pointing out some risks, and those risks exist. But of course, there's it's a system with trade-offs. So some of the trade-offs, or the meaning of some of the trade-offs, or some of the meanings of the trade-offs are risky, and some of them are good. And we'll have to see how it plays out. I certainly think that it's harder to predict, how proof of stake is going to perform over time in Ethereum, compared to trying to predict how proof of work would have. I think with proof of work, we kind of know what we have, and with proof of stake, maybe we don't. But that's not a bad thing. I think it's great that the Ethereum community is pushing things forward, and we'll find out. And I think the other thing that Zaki said, I totally agree with. If the specific path or specific implementation that Ethereum chose to go with proves to be subpar, then it can be adjusted. There are a ton of parameters that can be adjusted and changed. So I'm not, I think that's the nice thing. Like if you look at something like Bitcoin, the thing I love about Bitcoin is the fact that it's so hard to change. So it's very predictable, and I can have a pretty good idea of what Bitcoin is going to look like in 10 years from now, and that predictability is great. But I think with Ethereum, that's not what Ethereum stakeholders want. That's not what the community wants. I think it's a community that's focused on innovation, so they have to take those risks, and I think it's great. And we'll see. You can try to kind of be a prophet and guess what's going to happen, but in reality, like, who knows? We'll see. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be catastrophic. That's for sure. I think people are like, you had people saying things like, "Oh, once the merge activates, Ethereum will disappear." Like that just means you don't understand what you're talking about.
I think I tend to resonate with that. I think the biggest criticism that came about, or I think it was Nick was talking about it, is essentially that choosing this design basically defeats the main purpose of crypto, which is basically depoliticized money, right? So, and I wasn't. I was curious if you had any thoughts on that in particular, on to what extent that actually is going to hold, especially given the whole Tornado Cash events and so on. It does create this attack vector for people with, as you pointed out earlier, like if you have like larger stake, and then technically, and if you're regulated, then that gives you control on like you have this OFAC chain versus non-OFAC chain. So
yeah, I still think that for something like Bitcoin that has a very specific goal of being neutral money, then yeah, I think proof of work probably makes more sense, and also the approach of taking less risk makes a lot of sense. So even maybe if Satoshi happened to invent Bitcoin 10 years ago with proof of stake, then maybe that would be fine. But I think that specifically the approach of not taking big risks is more important for the neutrality of Bitcoin. So from that point of view, yes. However, I don't think that Ethereum's main goal is to be neutral money. I like Zaki's description of it as the largest economy in crypto, which is probably accurate. It's not specifically Ether as an asset is probably not the most important thing that happens in Ethereum. While Bitcoin is for sure the most important thing happening on the Bitcoin blockchain. Bitcoin, the asset, is definitely the most important thing on the Bitcoin blockchain, if not the only thing. So they have very different purposes and goals. For Bitcoin, yeah, I would say doesn't make sense to take big risks. For Ethereum, it's almost you have to, you have to take those risks. You have to keep pushing the envelope, and so I don't necessarily agree that it would have been better for Ethereum to stick around with proof of work. I don't think it changes the. I don't think it affects the goals. So if you think about what Ethereum was trying to achieve, I think that kind of change fits what Ethereum was trying to achieve.
Zaki?
So what I would say is a couple of things. Is I think people who I think that I will I'm like the biggest thing that I think about all day long is how this MEV question dominates all other questions in blockchain design. So Bitcoin has this problem, right? Which is it's very conservative, but sustaining its security budget without the issuance of new Bitcoin is a real open question and problem. On the other hand, right now, because the withdrawal functionality for rewards for proof of stake Ethereum has not been enabled, people are running Ethereum consensus with no issuance rewards at all. And the only rewards are the profits from MEV. And that's actually probably a sufficient security budget for Ethereum just on its own. So this fundamental question of whether or not you could run a blockchain post issuance of the native asset is actually being sort of that a little version of that experiment is operating right now. But then you have this other problem where Ethereum, I think, correctly felt that the current state of affairs with proof of work and MEV was unsustainable, where having all of this complicated application state where you can build, it was only a matter of time before people would fork the network to try and extract incrementally more MEV, and applications would break across, hours of user transactions could be undone, all kinds of terrible things could happen to the network as miners pursued their sort of rational profit maximization in the proof of work world, and those issues are more manageable in the proof of stake context. So I think that there is everyone who works on blockchain protocols, no one has yet found a system that is stable and secure and has all the properties that we want over the very long time. Now, Bitcoin issuance doesn't fall to the point where this is really a problem for decades. So it's not the pressure is immediate. But anyone who is trying to think about the long-term nature of these systems should be very interested in how this Ethereum experiment plays out, because Ethereum is definitely putting things into production that has never been put in production before.
Zaki, a quick question there. So I think one is going to be maybe perhaps makes sense to double click once again for what is MEV, right? And then I think Nicole, you had a question around how does MEV get impacted in POS? Maybe you can go ahead and ask that.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, quickly go over that. And what is MEV for those who don't know?
Yeah. Okay. So MEV is, I have been trying to figure out the normie explanation of MEV that works, and I don't think I've really hit on something that really works yet. So I'm going to try, and maybe Udi is better at this. Udi is in so many ways a better communicator than I am. But the basic idea of MEV is that when you produce a block, you get to see the financial transactions that are going to be included in that block, and you can figure out how to profit from seeing those transactions. So if you see someone is about to buy a large amount of ETH or a large amount, trade from USDC to ETH in a large amount, you might be like, hey, I will buy some ETH ahead of him, and the price will go up because of this trade, and I will sell that ETH, and I have this like sort of almost risk-free profit mechanism, or near risk-free profit mechanism that comes from producing blocks. And this risk-free profit mechanism is right now the security budget of ETH. It also like really impacts the centralization question, because the approach that Ethereum has taken is that they want to outsource this profit, like figuring out how to profit best from blocks, to third parties. So it's not like the node operator or the validator operator. So like, because if you're like a home staker, right, how are you ever going to figure out like what is the most profitable block? Like you don't have enough information, you don't have the financial connections, you don't have the capital resources, all of that stuff. So they have this thing called MEV Boost that went online today that allows you to call out and request when it's your turn to propose a block. Hey, will someone give me the most profitable block? And so now this whole question, like this whole architecture, I think, represents like a huge domain of new questions about like what does decentralized block production really mean, and like what are the checks and balances on these systems that are going to play out over the next couple of years.
I think Zaki. Okay, sorry. Did you want to go ahead first?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think it's a great explanation, and I don't have a solution for how to explain it either, but just to try to give another angle to this. Maybe for some people it will be more comfortable to not think of this as a technical term and more as a economic or financial term, and it's really not very different from if you guys have been hearing about like how Robinhood makes money. There's been talks about maybe they let people trade on Robinhood without fees, but they will see the order flow, so they see what people buy and sell, and maybe they can let some trading firms get this information and front run some trades from customers, for example. That's maybe speculation, but there's been a lot of talk about that. So that's a very common thing in the financial world. It's known that if you can know what trades are supposed to happen before they're settled, then you can kind of front run them and take advantage of that. MEV is basically that, but decentralized. So there's no one firm that gets this information. The information is open, and then the question is who can act on it, and the people who can act on it are the people who produce the block. So it's either miners or stakers in proof of stake, and then that has a lot of implications because that can be a significant revenue stream for miners or for stakers. So that can really affect their decision making. It's some if a chain is very active with economic activity, not necessarily with transactions that are just moving money around from side to side, but if they're very active with economic activity that you can kind of parse and understand, then that can actually end up being more valuable to block producers than the actual block reward or the fees, depending on how active the chain is.
So I had something to add here, or maybe perhaps a question for both of you. It seems, based on the responses, it seems like one of the main reasons why MEV occurs is because of trading. It comes mainly from trading applications, and particularly when you do pricing on chain, and then how the price moves based on every single transaction. So as a result, anyone who has a last look essentially gets to and has the power to reorder transactions. Basically has this advantage to basically.
I want to just disagree with that and say that most of the MEV either comes from like large dislocations in markets. Like I think I previously had said that like 40% of all MEV in Cosmos happened in the 2 days of the Terra collapse. The other one is also liquidations and lending markets, and leverage are also big sources of MEV. So it's not just trading. It's or like these like specific subtypes of trading activity.
Got it. So I think that was my question, but I think you answered it. My question was, is it mainly because of trading, or are there any other applications that are also causing it? And I suppose my other philosophical question then would be, does it make sense? Is there such a thing as good MEV or bad MEV? And two, uh, it's also, should, if it were considered to be a negative, then should layer ones be the ones responsible for optimizing to not have MEV exploits, or would you rather have applications built that protect users from MEV attacks? Because I think at the end of the day, MEV is happening at the expense of the end users who are using the protocols, right? So, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that if we're trying to think when does MEV happen, I would say it is probably most common whenever there's a great sense of urgency for any type of financial transaction. So if a transaction is, one, it's something that anyone can take advantage of, and two, it is very urgent. Well, I'm kind of thinking of through the back of my head here, but I think that would be a good description of when MEV becomes relevant, because you will have all these people who are trying to get to the cake as soon as they can before everyone else, and then it becomes really important to ask who calls the shots, who gets to decide who's first. So that's kind of where MEV you can expect it, I think, to grow a lot. And that doesn't necessarily happen all the time, but definitely happens in times of like major liquidations, and definitely if an entire economy collapses, then those are definitely times when a lot of urgency is going to be important. And honestly, you've seen that even in something simple like Bitcoin back in 2017, where in order to access a lot of crypto trades back then, you had to transfer Bitcoin from side to side. So you had miners taking advantage of that too, like maybe getting their transactions from one exchange to another exchange before others. That's a form of the MEV too, and you saw a lot of kind of shenanigans around that. But as a lot of the economic activity moved to other chains, it's definitely happening in other places. It's much more easy to analyze them too. Now, is it good or bad? It's I think the general consensus is probably it's just a fact of life. And then, ideally, I guess, in an ideal world, everything will be decentralized enough, and everyone can participate in producing blocks, and then you get your fair chance at the MEV if you want. And even if you don't participate, you can kind of hope that, as a user, you can hope that it's arced down to a level that is reasonable for you as a user. But then there are a lot of sidebars to that, and does the existence of MEV actually hurt some of the assumptions in designing those protocols?
Yeah, because the dilemma here, I was thinking about, maybe perhaps you guys can clarify it for me, is if I think MEV becomes one of the key sources of incentives for miners to partake in POS, then I suppose MEV is a good thing from their perspective. But at the same time, if a user who's using a dApp wants to have more guarantees around the transaction and not to get robbed because of MEV bots, if they don't want that, then suppose from their perspective, any MEV exploits is a bad thing, or at least from a trading perspective. Right? So I was curious to hear if you had any different stances, Zaki, or if I had any misconceptions there.
Yeah. Okay. So I think you do have a misconception, and I think there's a great example of it, which is in 2020 there was this event that is called Black Thursday, and Black Thursday was characterized by like a big drop in the price of ETH. But the more important thing is that liquidations in MakerDAO, which is supposed to basically liquidate stablecoin collateral vaults at usually like a 20% haircut, so 20% off the trading price of ETH. Instead, liquidated some of their vaults at essentially zero, and it was like a huge destabilizing impact on like one of the largest applications on Ethereum. And one of the things that has changed since Black Thursday was the emergence of this MEV ecosystem, specifically around liquidations. And so I think there are large classes of applications where MEV extractors work collaboratively with users to get the sort of best possible application, where it is not an antagonistic relationship. And then I think that there's a lot of work that can be done, and I think Hashflow does some of this work, mitigating parts of MEV, parts of MEV which are not collaborative and are purely user extractive, as you see, for instance, in like interacting with AMMs.
Thank you, Zaki. I wanted to take this in a completely different direction for the remaining time that we have left. And Udi, I actually pinned your tweet from August. You said one day after Ethereum's merge, Apple will release iOS 16. You probably think this is of no significance, but you're wrong. iOS 16 introduces passkeys, new tech that will kill passwords on websites and will also obsolete the idea of Web3 authentication. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to talk about that. I'll just preface by saying that I really just use Ethereum's merge as a hook. It has nothing to do with the merge whatsoever. And it's I also end up being wrong because the iOS 16 was released before the merge, but I couldn't have predicted that, so that's fine. Anyways, so it's, apparently like Apple and Microsoft and Google are collaborating on this cool web standard where basically you can authenticate to websites with your face or your fingerprint instead of using passwords, and those biometrics stay on your device. They don't ever end up on any server, and it actually uses the same public key cryptography that we all love from the Web3 world. Behind the scenes, it's very similar to how you use MetaMask to authenticate yourself to a website. It's just the way it works is so much smoother, and it's actually available on probably about 1 billion devices as we speak, as opposed to MetaMask, which is probably not getting to $1 billion users anytime soon. And by the way, I don't know if anyone else feels like that, but even when I'm on a Twitter space and I say the word MetaMask, I kind of cringe because I feel like all the spam bots are going to show up
because
I'm saying
they're going to attack us.
Yeah, I'm saying MetaMask, and I'm like, oh no, I shouldn't have said that. Anyways, but back to the topic. So it's actually like it's a really cool tech because it's super easy to use and it's very secure and has great like anti-phishing measures, and it kind of obsoletes both passwords and two-factor authentication, which are both very annoying. So there are actually like a bunch of very major websites that have already adopted it in the last couple of days since it was released, and I think as Microsoft and Google release their versions of it later this year, I think it will actually be very widely adopted. And of course, it's very hyperbolic for me to put it in the tweet about the merge. It has nothing to do with Ethereum or Web3 at all. But I think that it does kind of shows that one of those big promises that people are talking about with so-called Web3 is that it will allow for safe and secure authentication for everyone, and I think that aspect is probably not going to play out because the traditional web industry actually has a very good solution that is already being deployed to billions of devices. So it's kind of crazy to say that the passwords are going to disappear from the world in a couple of years, but I actually think they will. I think they finally found a good solution that I think the wide population is going to use, which is great.
Yeah, that is great. By the way, I love that you said with such humility, well, I was wrong. I mean, I feel like more people in this space especially need that that kind of humility. Nobody can be right about everything. Even Udi, who, by the way, Udi, I love your takes on Twitter. You're such a good follow, and Zaki as well. So glad that I found you guys. Varun actually showed me Zaki's profile for the first time. So yeah, this has been a great episode of the DeFi State. Be sure to follow Udi and Zaki. They are two very bright minds. This was one of my favorite episodes of this show. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to follow myself and Hashflow and also Varun. You'll get notifications about these spaces. We do them every Thursday, usually at 9 a.m. PST. And once in a while the time changes if our guests can't make it, but easy to keep updated if you just follow Hashflow. So thank you for being here, Udi, Zaki. Thank you. Hope to have you back, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thank God, this was fun.
Of course.